Well, for a little bit more on this, we're now joined by Hassen Lorgat, who's from the Benchmarks Foundation. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Okay. Internet is suffering. Nothing now.
Can you hear me, Hassen? Hello, Hassen. Can you hear me? All right. It looks like Hassen...
Thank you for having me.
Ah, great. Fantastic. Hassen,
yes, I can.
Yeah, it's been 10 years. I just wonder, on the anniversary, what were your reflections looking back?
We went to Marikana on the 10th. Bishop Josie Oka, a large delegation, Moses Kluti, our director, our research staff, and we went to do an inspection in loco in the area. To sketch some background, 4 days before the massacre, the Benchmarks Foundation published a report, Communities in the Platinum Minefields, Policy Gap number 6, which looked at platinum in the Bojanala district. And that report in 2012 itself was a reflection on what the organization had done in 2007. And what we found then was quite appalling, and we wrote about it, but the main thrust was that there was a failure of employment. Local employment was a big grievance. In fact, the companies that were studied was Anglo Platinum, Impala Platinum, Lonmin, Extrata, Aquarius, and Royal Bafokeng. And although today we are focused around Lonmin, we do think there were regional indicators that spoke to all those other mines. So for us, when we went there, it was, of course, 2012 was after the 2009 platinum boom. So things were moving and workers' expectations were high. But when we got there, we found that communities were suffering. The sewerage was running there, unsafe railway lines, air pollution, massive local unemployment, all that. And when we went there last week, right, in contrast to the propaganda from Sibanye, we found very little had changed. In fact, people tell us things have gotten worse.
So you're saying that if you wrote that report that you wrote 10 years ago, by and large, it would read the same?
We are saddened to say it, because if you look at 4 of the people who bought Lonmin, Sibanye in 2019, Sibanye Stillwater, 4 executives, right, took home about 700 million rand in terms of their income, bonuses, etc., etc. The CEO, Froneman himself, took home 300 million. When we walked in some of those areas, in RDP section, we found sewage, and SABC were there the whole day with us. Sewage running through there, dead animals there. You know, the stench was so heavy for some of the journalists, they had to cover their mouths. In Kaneng, what we found was that people were very disillusioned because there was a hospital there built by Sibanye, but the local community could not access it, right? So really, you know, when we went earlier in the first 2 stops, in Lopologang and Maritlogwa, we found some people betting for the company. They were kind of trying to disrupt our voices, and the bishop asked them, but guys, why don't you work together? You also poor, you know, I haven't got a job. And one of the community people leading us there said to us, we get good agreements amongst ourselves during the day. At night, Teresa Mine comes about and then tries to dislodge our unity. Because when there's so much hunger and poverty, there's no stability. People look after their own stomachs. So we found that, and it was very devastating for us. So quite clearly, you know, after spending 2 days in the area, we're not convinced that the mining companies have done enough. We're not convinced that our mineral resources department is doing enough to ensure that these companies live up to their promises they made through the mine, through the social and labor plans, to all the promises for them to mine there. You know, and if they don't really deliver on the communities, as we've discussed with illegal mining, so-called, the license have to be revoked. And the sad thing is that Sibanya presents itself as a patriotic mine, patriotic South African who can speak truth to power. The true test of what you do must be felt by the local people there and not by what you tell us. Show us that the water is clean. Show us that they're living in decent accommodation. And clearly it's not for one company to do. And all those other companies that are there must uplift this area. What it looks like a war zone where people have made big holes in the earth and simply robbed the people of their last senses of dignity. The pollution, the noise pollution, the air pollution is rampant there. And clearly, it's not a place that you should be going to. And Sibanya themselves have tried to take people on a tour and take them on a different route, trying to not show them the warts which they claim they want to address. A true and honest corporate citizen will deal with the difficulties and the tough talking community people and not just go to the sweetheart deals to try and make sure that the profit continues unabated.
The private sector for sure has a role to play, but some people might point to government and say that things like sewerage surely is a municipal government competency.
Yes, but if you're thinking of a company town where people have expectations, where there's an externalization of costs, what you're finding is that the effluent, the rubbish from the mine, the air pollution, all that impacts upon people. While the company may be paying, well, we hope so, taxes, right? This is taken away due to ill health, to people who are not eating properly and suffering. So clearly, you know, that mining is quite a violent system, historically been that way. In fact, when we now talk about Marikana, we ignore the externalization of costs, right? People have an expectation that they would get employment if the mine is in their area. And they told us that jobs are being sold in a couple of those mines, right? You know, and we need to stay focused on this issue. Everyone laments the fact that 33 and 10 humans were killed on those fateful days. But historically, this is how mining has been. When people were forced off the land, it was a violent process. Black people did not want to work on mines, so they introduced taxes. All those processes are structural violence. And if you didn't listen, there was the tax, and there was also physical violence, the butt of a gun, ngopkiri, or guns. So clearly, mining is quite violent. And what we expected now, 27, almost 30 years after our freedom, was to have a new dispensation. This we are waiting for.
Hassen, I wish we could talk for a little longer, but we've run out of time. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Always good to talk to you. Thanks for your thoughts.
Thank you for having me.
All right, that's Hassen Lorgat from Benchmarks Foundation saying, sadly, 10 years on, a report that they wrote about the mining sector, particularly around Marikana, pointed to so many deficiencies and shortcomings, and that 10 years later, sadly, nothing seems to have moved forward, and the communities say that things are actually worse.